and welcome to Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin. This is a production of Red Apples Media. We're broadcasting out of WLBE Real Country, 790 AM out of Leesburg, Florida. And if you're watching us on Lake Sumter Television, you're doing so on Comcast Channel 13, Bright House 498, and CenturyLink Prism Channel 83. So today we have a very serious topic, and I've asked two very special and knowledgeable guests on the subject. With the climate of our country in our state, with all of the school shootings, school safety has become a paramount concern for local communities as well as the rest of the nation. So today I've invited Superintendent of Lake County Schools, Diane Kornegay, and Public Information Officer from Lake County Sheriff's, Fred Jones, to help us navigate some of the more recent news and what we're doing to protect our students in schools. Diane, thank you very much for taking the time out of what I'm sure is a very busy day to come and share this information.
Well, thank you, Kris. This is an incredibly important topic, so I appreciate you having me today.
Oh, absolutely, especially with school coming just so close, because there's been a lot of changes over the summer.
You're right, it has, and we're just 1 week away from the exciting start of school.
And if you could, update our audience on what's going to be different from last year than this year in regards to school safety, and just so they have an idea what we're going to be discussing.
So today we're going to be discussing really two aspects of new things that we'll see in our schools in the coming year. These are all coming as a requirement of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act that was passed by our legislators in the past legislative session, which has two main specific things that we'll be focusing on this year. One is school safety and security, and the second is increased mental health support services for students.
Okay. What does that mean? Because for a lot of people out there, well, what can we change? What can we make better that we don't already have?
So there's a lot that we can do differently. Part of the legislative requirements was that we have a school security officer on every one of our campuses, and the legislators did give us some options as to how we go about making sure that that happens.
Okay.
We can partner with local law enforcement to provide a school resource deputy that's a certified and trained officer, or they did give us an option of starting our own police force, which is not something that we here in Lake County are looking to do. We're in the business of education,
Sure.
so that we're going to work with our law enforcement partners to help provide that service. And lastly, there was an opportunity that if we were unable to have a certified and trained law enforcement officer, that we could have a guardian. And these are highly trained individuals. They're trained by our Sheriff's Department, and they can serve as a law enforcement officer in our schools for the coming year. So those are our three options. So we've approached that kind of in a hybrid model that we're combining both. Where we already have school resource officers in every one of our middle and high schools, and we will have them in our elementary schools with the exception of a few, to which we'll have an armed security officer instead of a certified deputy.
Okay. So I don't want to say beefing up, but ensuring that there's a presence in every one of our schools now, especially the elementary, which we just haven't done in the past, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
This will be new for our elementary schools. But yes, every school campus in Lake County will have a school security officer.
Okay. So we're looking at, I don't want to say, it's actually not that big of an overhaul, but it's a huge addition. You've been on basically a tour over the summer, talking to city officials throughout Lake County. Can you talk to us a little bit about the purpose behind that?
Well, when the requirement came from the state, it came as, unfortunately, often what we see is an unfunded mandate in some regards. So there was some funding attached to it. So we received about $1.2 million. There was a little bit more. Some of that went to our charter schools, but for our public schools, about $1.2 million that can only be used for the purpose of additional school resource officers. So the money can't be used for any of the officers that we currently have in our middle and high schools. $1.2 million is not enough to get a certified deputy in every one of our schools. But that was the preference of the board. We know that there are less expensive routes, but we wanted the best route and
Sure.
the route that would give us the maximum level of security for our kids. And so I sought to how we were going to, as a community, come together to get the additional funding that we needed. So I reached out early to a couple of our cities, specifically starting with our police chiefs, and in some cases the city managers, and floated the idea of, what do you think? We obviously don't have enough money to do what we want to do, which was to put a deputy in every school. Would you be willing to partner with us and let us pay half of the salary and benefits for this first year, so that we could make that a reality? And the support of our cities and police chiefs has just been tremendous, and I can't just say enough about how great the community has been, my outreach to them, and their spirit to say, we want to partner with you, these are our kids, and we want to do the best for our kids. And so we've had, of our 12 municipalities, we've had 8 of them come alongside of us to split the cost with us for this first year.
Excellent.
As well as our sheriff, who will be covering those schools that are under the county's jurisdiction. So it's been just a tremendous outreach, and I'm just very grateful.
So you're managing new rules and regulations that require an exceptional amount of funding, and the state says you have to do this. This isn't really an option, right? I mean, I understand you had choices, but I believe you went with the choice any other county or district would probably go with. That's a lot of money to try to make up. How are the cities looking at trying to do this, or to help participate? Because I guess what I'm asking is funding, right? We're talking about the mill rate increase, which is coming up pretty soon. They'll have that choice, correct?
Correct. It is on the ballot for the primary on August the 28th. And it is a 0.75 millage property tax increase, specifically for the purpose of funding a certified and trained resource deputy in every one of our schools. Right now, as we said, the cities are helping to partner with that, but this is a cost that they can't continue to incur as they deal with their own financial restraints.
Sure. And there's some concern out there in the community about this. Where's the money going? And well, I don't understand. If the state said do it, where's the state funding? And I guess what I would like to do is make sure that the audience is aware that nothing is that cut and dry. It's not that easy. They didn't do the math necessarily before they started to allot the funding. Now, the state funding, did that go by, I guess by district, correct? Or by county? How did that go? Your funding for this?
Yeah, your funding from the state is always based on the number of students that you have, and so that was our portion, was the 1.2 after the portion to the charters, specifically again for resource officers. Now there is another significant funding piece to this as well, and that is the other requirement of this Safety Act, is that we are also to provide additional mental health supports, being more proactive and preventative rather than always reacting to situations. We know that we have students that are struggling with all types of mental health issues, and so how do we provide additional funding to allow for us to better meet the services of those students as well as our families that may be struggling with issues. And so to get ahead of it so that we're not always talking about school safety, that we want to take a proactive approach. And so that's going to require a lot of additional cost as well. We did receive right about $1 million from the state. We're going to be using those dollars to add some mental health specialists to our schools that we don't currently have in place.
Okay.
And so we'll be using that for that, as well as to increase our partnership with LifeStream, who is our local provider for mental health services. So they're going to be more engaged in some of the work that we're doing specifically with our students in our schools by covering cost of maybe students that don't have insurance but need additional services, or they need services beyond what their insurance will provide.
Okay. Again, another important aspect, and I don't want our audience to think it's just about officers on campus, because in today's climate that may not be enough. You're also looking at hardening I'm looking at school hardening, where you're looking at additional security measures that's more permanent fixtures, I guess I should say. Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So
because this is all coming out, this is all in the same plan or the project, I should say.
It is, yes.
Okay.
School hardening is a major part of that. We have estimated, as we've looked at every school campus, we did a threat assessment and went through our facilities looking at reinforced doors, upgrades to cameras, reinforced windows, all of the things that we would want to ensure the maximum level of security. And we have estimated that if we were to truly harden every school to the maximum level that we would like to, it would cost us about $87 million. Obviously, it's going to take a while to get there, but we know that with the dollars that could be generated by the referendum, that we would be able to start with the cameras that we have in place to be able to increase the numbers of cameras and improve those that we currently have in place. We also have some technologies and other software that we'd like to put in place that would help to maximize security efforts as well. So there's a laundry list of hardening efforts that we'll go through and do as many as we can in the years to come until we can achieve the maximum level of security for our school campuses.
And naturally, again, there's so many ways to look at this. It's not just, and I'm referring to social media and people expressing concern. Pro, against, you're always going to have that no matter what the topic is, but it's not just as simple as cops in schools. You're working with a bigger picture. Again, people are concerned with who's paying for it. It sounds like you've kind of got a solid plan. That 80 million number is just ridiculous to me, though. I'll do everything I can to help you with that because that is such a large number.
Yes, it is.
But again, it brings concern for a lot of the residents in Lake County. What would you say to the concerns of the people if this referendum passes? Because there's people pro and con. Some are against it, some are for it. What can you say that would maybe bring their mind at ease on the reason why we need to do this through a referendum?
Well, we need to do it because we simply don't have the money to do it otherwise. So as we think really about a large portion of these dollars going towards mental health services, we know that early identification and prevention programs, we need these in place in our schools. So that we're not always being reactive, that we can be proactive in meeting the needs of our kids. And we know that early prevention, looking at risk factors, screening of students, things that these dollars would actually go towards, training for teachers and for staff to identify the early risk factors of students. And what do you do about a student who's struggling with depression and anxiety? How do we provide training for parents as well as students about dealing with these types of issues? And we also will use the dollars to implement the state's youth mental health program that will be in all of our schools in the coming year. Another thing that we really need these dollars for is we do not have a nurse in every one of our schools. That's concerning to me.
I recently heard that.
And
I was shocked.
I was as well. And we also know that we're severely understaffed in regards to school guidance counselors. We know that they play such a critical role. These folks have such a heart for working with kids, but often they're focusing on paperwork, testing, other mandates that get placed on these individuals' plates. We need more guidance counselors because we need more of these folks working directly with our students. And so that is our hope, to increase those folks as well. We also need more social workers. We do not have enough at all that can go out and help to match students with services, work with families, work with our interagencies. There's so much work to be done in the area of mental health prevention and support, and we need more folks to make that happen. And these are very critical roles that we just don't have enough of in our schools.
And again, you've just painted a bigger picture. A lot of what you're trying to accomplish here isn't reactive, but it's proactive, right? You're trying to prevent.
Right.
It's preventative. And that's important. If you can stop it from happening, well, maybe we can whittle, some of this stuff down the road. Well, Superintendent, that is about all the time we have for this segment. Is there any last minute remarks or something that you want to tell the public? Go team, go Lake County, something along those lines?
Well, we're looking forward to a wonderful school year ahead. We had great success this previous year, and we're going to stay the course. And I'm just thrilled to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and the public today about the great things happening and how you all can help support us in the year to come.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming. And that's it for right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Fred Jones, Public Information Officer from Lake County Sheriff's Department. We'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back to Radio Waves. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. On our first segment, before the break, we were speaking with Superintendent of Lake County Schools, Diane Kornegay, about the legislative laws that were passed over the summer and how she's looking at basically financing and implementing and the reasons behind that. For the second half of the show, I've invited Fred Jones, Sergeant Fred Jones, my apologies.
No problem.
Public Information Officer from Lake County Sheriff's Office. Fred, thank you so much for coming on to the show and, again, sharing your side of this story.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start by, you have a monumental task ahead of you as well. You are now required to have law enforcement officers in every school. Whereas in the previous year, elementary schools just wasn't a concern. I don't want to say was not a concern, was not the focus.
Right.
Okay. What can we expect now that this law has been passed from the state? And what should we expect and what should we not expect, if there is anything?
Right. It's, I would call it business as usual, except expanded. And so I think it's a positive thing anytime you get law enforcement officers or guardians, for that matter, in the schools. One thing, you have protection for these children. And secondly, with law enforcement in the schools, you have a chance for children to start building relationships with law enforcement early.
Now, that's a nice aspect as well. I know there's been a big push because law enforcement's, well, throughout history, law, it depends on the person.
Right.
But I know there's been a big push for that because there's a lot of people out there doing very good deeds, very good work, and they don't get the recognition that they deserve.
No, and I've worked 9 years in the schools prior to, the position I'm in now, and students have different perspectives. They have different opinions of law enforcement until they actually get to meet them and to interact with them. And, it's a way for them to build relationships. And, we think about keeping our kids safe is about, taking care of a bad guy that comes on campus. Sometimes keeping the kids safe means sitting down, talking to them, listening to them, and they'll give you information to help keep them safe. So it's about building relationships as well.
Okay. So how is the implementation of this going so far? Because the deadline was when? This school year, correct?
Yeah, now.
Right now?
Yes.
How have we done so far?
We're there. We're where we need to be. It took a lot of people doing a lot more, as far as we had members of our SWAT team, for example. A lot of them did a lot of hours training the new guardians. They did 132 hours of gun training, weapons training. And I can break that down, but it's intensive what they had to go through. I myself got back into the training portion of it because the mandate states that every law enforcement officer going into the school has to be trained in crisis intervention training and able to de-escalate situations. So in 2 months, we've trained 64. Next week would be another class, but we would have trained 64 law enforcement officers in crisis intervention training.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we currently have enough officers for all of these schools?
We do.
Okay. Is that all on the back of the sheriff department for Lake County?
Well, I don't know the ins and outs, but I know, a lot of agencies have stepped forward.
Okay.
And I spoke to some of these guys at Claremont and Leesburg and Mount Dora, and there's other agencies I'm probably leaving out, but a lot of them stepped up and, we trained together, which is good also. So this brought us even closer together. Because if we do have a situation in a school, we may have the Lake County Sheriff's Office as well as municipalities responding.
Right. And I'd like to touch base a little bit on the Guardian as well, because Lake County was the first in Central Florida to actually allow or permit for these Guardians. Mm-hmm. And this is just for our audience, this is the training you're talking about.
Right.
Actually, you're talking about two separate. Let me be real clear. You're talking about the additional training that the law enforcement officers themselves
Right.
are undergoing, but you're also undergoing the training for the guardians.
Correct.
Who are guardians, and what if you have a guardian? Do you still need a law enforcement officer?
Well, the mandate stipulates that one or the other needs to be in the school, and that's for the school safety component of it. So every school will be covered with some sort of security.
Okay, so we have law enforcement on our schools now. Even elementary schools.
Right.
I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a shame. I understand why, and believe me, but I just hate to know that we've actually got to this point.
Right.
So can you walk us through a little bit on the staffing for the sheriff's department? Because I know it sounds like you're doing well enough now.
Right.
But let's talk future down the road. Are you going to have to hire an additional deputies, or are you guys planning for that? Because I know for a while there was talk about, listen, we may need more deputies.
Right. Right.
Is that an issue, or are you being able to compensate that with other law enforcement?
Well, Lake County is growing, and I know they think that by 2020 we may have over 400,000 people here in Lake County. And so I know there are additional schools that are coming up. So we are going to need additional deputies to help cover this. The growth is going to be fast, and we're trying to stay ahead of it. And so, because we're not just thinking about today, we're thinking about tomorrow and moving forward. So we know the growth is coming, and we're trying to prepare for it as an agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was getting. I've spoken with the sheriff in the past and other law enforcement agencies, and we're even business development for Lake County. And
Right.
Lake County's growing. And just like anything else, bigger it gets, the more of everything you need.
Oh, absolutely.
Teachers, businesses, law enforcement, fire, what have you. Okay, so who can be a guardian? Let me ask that, just because I know there's a lot of concern in our audience or just in our local area on who can be a guardian.
Right. Well, that person has to be at least 18 years old. I believe it's 21 years old.
Okay.
But there's an extensive background check on them to make sure there's no criminal past that they have.
Sure.
And also, they go through a training that's very intense, And I just kind of give you a rundown of it because, you know what, not everyone can do this, It's very physical. There's 132 hours. Now, that's 80 hours of firearms instructions. That is same model as the academy recruits go through. And additional to that, there's 16 hours of precision pistol. That means they have to shoot between two objects and hit their target,
Wow.
Then there's defensive tactics with ground fighting. They go through 8 hours of active shooter training as well, the same thing that our law enforcement go through. And then there's 12 hours of legal overview of the Florida statute. And so they have an understanding, even though they're not sworn deputies, they have an understanding of the law, So altogether, that's 132 hours, and it was intense. And these men and women that went through it, they should be commended. So this is not just, Joe Smo off the street coming in, hey, I want to be your security.
Right.
We want to make sure that we have the best of the best protecting the children of Lake County.
Now, is this a volunteer force?
Yep, and I'll have to check on that. But,
Okay. Okay. No, just out of curiosity, because
Right.
there may be listeners now that say, I think that's something
Yeah, and I think
I would like to do to help the community.
Yeah, I think there's some sort of compensation for it. But like I said, I'm proud of them. I had an opportunity to go out there to the firing range when they were out there and to see them, and they're dedicated. And that's what's important because, these parents are driving up, they're dropping off, their kids, and they're saying, look, I'm looking for you to protect my children. And so it's an intense training. We make sure that they're prepared for it.
Okay. Now, the guardians, the administration in schools, they're now allowed, with the proper training,
Correct.
to carry or to have access to firearms on campus. Are we talking, just to be clear, are we talking about the same program, or is that a separate entity where you have administrators in schools or volunteer, basically, people who raise their hand and say, I'll go through the training? Are they one and the same?
They're one and the same. They all went through
Okay.
the same intense training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if someone was interested in maybe getting more information about this, what's your website where they might be able to get some background information and participate if they want?
Right, that will be lcso.org. Or if they want to call the Sheriff's Office at 343-2101 and ask for the Training Bureau, and someone there will be able to give them more information.
Okay. So it sounds to me like the implementation is going good. Are you guys like totally strapped or no?
We're
Strapped. Poor choice of words.
that too.
No pun intended.
We're ready. We're ready, and we're looking forward to this school year. And it's going to be a challenge, just like anything when it's first brought to our attention. But everyone came together, and we're going to make sure that Lake County is going to be a safe place for the kids to go this year.
So Fred, there's a new system out there now. Maps. Is that correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to me what exactly that is and how it might help law enforcement?
Right. Well, you think about when law enforcement is responding to an active shooter situation, one of the most important things is going to be communication. And in the past, the only way to communicate something was going on is through radio. And how radio traffic can get, everyone wants to grab the radio at one time. It can get confusing.
Right.
And so what we've done is we've used a resource we've already had, which is called Power DMS. It was a software that we would use to send out policies to our deputies and things of that nature. But we also discovered that we could take every school in Lake County and put their blueprint within that software called Maps.
Is that right?
Yes, and it's amazing to watch it work. I know when they pulled up, say, for instance, Eustis High School. If there was a situation at Eustis High School and you were to tell the responding deputies, from Road Patrol that, hey, it's going to be Building 5, they'll be like, well, where's a Building 5? We don't know this. But with this new software, they're able to pull up the map, get an area view of the school, and actually understand where Building 5 is. And there are some components of it where they can still have access to some of the cameras in the school also to see what's going on.
So they can get an extensive amount of information.
Right.
Before they arrive on scene.
Exactly.
That's critical.
And I think what's even
Instead
more
of
important,
walking into a room not knowing what's going on.
Exactly. And with the use of the cameras, I think what is really great is if that active shooter is somewhere and we're able to find where that person is, and so now we can engage that person and stop that person from moving forward, doing what he's doing. And so it's about safety and eliminating the threat.
All right. Well, I gave the superintendent parting words. Do you have anything you'd like to say to our local listeners before we break the show? That's how fast time goes.
I know. All I can say is start having your kids wake up early now because school is about to start. They can't sleep into 12 anymore.
There you go. You heard it here, folks. Well, Fred, thank you so much for taking the time. This is more pertinent now than I think it has been in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And that wraps up Radio Waves. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin. We'll see you next time.